Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective, part 2 of This Image Single-Handedly Debunked Postmillennialism. Now, before we continue, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. We started deconstructing Doug Wilson's post-millennial presentation, his video. And I said, as you see in my thumbnail, that the image here single-handedly debunks their view. And I'm going to continue kind of highlighting that. Why? One reason why is because here is a prophetic vision, a prophetic dream, and a prophetic timeline to the second coming of Jesus Christ. In other words, we have right here the events, some of the events that's going to happen all the way up until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, in part 1, we went through Pastor Doug's introduction in his part 1. And basically what he was doing was kind of defining some terms like wooden, literal definitions or meanings. And as I said, the reason why he is doing that is because he is setting up his argument for preterism. Now, preterism and postmillennialism and amillennialism are similar in thought, pretty much like this, okay? They kind of believe that the way that you interpret scripture is it's allegorical, metaphorically, or symbols, because you hear them say that term a lot. Okay. Now, of course, what they don't tell you is that these symbols are explained. That's what they don't tell you. But the reason why they don't tell you that is because what they believe is that if you interpret the prophetic prophecies allegorically, you kind of attach your own meaning to whatever the meanings are. Now, where do they get these meanings? So, for example, Doug Wilson, he's going to admit that he is a preterist. So his basic view is that the events of Matthew 24 and the events of the book of Revelations have already happened. Now, they don't tell you, there's no scripture that they kind of bring out to tell you that. That's why they fall back on saying, hey, well, you don't take it woodenly. So in order to do that, if you say, well, we're not going to define it woodenly or literally or woodenly, what they mean by that is that, as he used the example, when Jesus says, I am the door, you wouldn't say, oh, Jesus is an actual door. Well, no one takes that. No one reads that. I've never seen anyone anywhere ever teach that Jesus is an actual door on hinges with a frame, right? No one says that. But people do say he's the door, because they take it as the meaning. He is the entrance in. He is the way in. That's the way they take it. Now, so if you're going to say now, so watch this. So Jesus did not explain, well, this is what I mean by door. That I'm not an actual door, guys. He didn't explain that. And you know why? He didn't have to explain that. That the readers will understand that what he really means is that he's the entrance, okay? Now, where scripture thinks we need understanding, it gives us the understanding. So, for example, when Jesus is speaking to John in the first chapter of the book of Revelation, and he says the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, right? Now, no one then walks away. If Jesus did not explain this, because John said he saw this figure with 7 stars in his hand, a sword coming out of his mouth, and 7 lampstands, right? Well, let's say if he didn't explain that, then you might think, right, that, okay, Jesus or a figure is walking around with several actual stars. Well, Jesus explains what the stars are. He says he explains what the lampstands are. The stars are the angels, and the lampstands are the churches. So now we don't have to wonder about that. We don't have to you know insert our own interpretations to that. So I want to get back to the video. I'm going to pick it up in part 2 of Pastor Doug. And as we are dissecting, and remember, this is Pastor Doug Wilson. I have other thoughts on Pastor Doug Wilson as well, but I'm not going to get into it in this video. But this is the video itself, Postmillennialism. Now, the reason why I say that is because postmillennialists are closely tied now. A lot of them are closely tied to white Christian nationalists. Okay, Christian nationalists. Yeah, I did have a slip when I said white Christian nationalists, but I'm not here to get into that. It's coming. The video is coming. But Christian nationalists, okay, and so you'll see that they're very closely tied to that. For example, Pastor Jeff Durbin, theologian, I'm going to say master apologist, James White, they're all post-millennialists, which is surprising to me since they're also Calvin. So I want to maybe ask the question, are Calvinists, all Calvinists now switching over to being post-millennialists and preterists, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. Now, he's also going to define, too, what post-millennials believe, which is going to be also very interesting. Very interesting definition. And so again, I'm not going to jump ahead. I'll let Pastor Doug explain this. Okay. Just so we can kind of go back. Let me see. He is again. I'm going to pick it up at chapter 2, but again, basically, in the introduction and in the part 1, he was sort of setting up his kind of stage for how we should understand Scripture from a wooden standpoint versus literal versus symbolic, because that's going to be extremely important to understanding how, or the method of interpretation for preterism and postmillennialism.
Among those who believe the Bible, there are different schools of thought with regard to the fulfillment of such biblical prophecy. And when I say believe the Bible, I'm talking about genuine faith, faith in the inspiration, infallibility, and inerrancy of Scripture. The names of these positions are the futurist, the historicist, the idealist, and the preterist. To illustrate the differences between the positions, I will take material from the book of Revelation, as this is the central.
Now, so far, like I said, and let me kind of reiterate, he's doing a great job of explaining in this. So a lot of this I don't need to respond to because he's doing a good job of explaining it. As I said, ultimately what this is going to come down to is really how he applies, especially to his view, which he's getting ready to tell us what his view is.
Prophecy when it comes to the last things. One believes that when the vision of Revelation was first given, the fulfillment of it was to be found in John's future, but because it hasn't happened yet, those events must also be in our future. This, not surprisingly, is called the futurist position. If someone were to say that the beast of Revelation is the European Union, a revived version of the Roman Empire, this would be a futurist.
But there's also a theological view too. So remember, these are theological terms. Not, in other words, if you read the Bible, you don't find these terms or ideology. Even this this view here of the European Union, a revised version of the Roman Empire. If you go back to the image, that would be the 10 toes. Okay. Now the Bible doesn't call it that, and I just want to make it clear. That's why I said these are theological terms that he's given, not biblical terms or explanations. The Bible gives us explanations. This is the theological one.
The historicist believes that fulfillment was all in John's future, but that fulfillment began almost immediately and has continued to do so down through church history. This is the historicist position. For example, in 1572, thousands of Protestants were slaughtered in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. If someone interpreted this as a fulfillment of the persecution described in Revelation 13, 5 through 10, it would be an example of the historicist interpretation.
Now, let me show you, here's a good example of why that interpretation would be wrong. So let me go there. Let's go to Revelation chapter 13. So, Revelation chapter 13. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this out is because, as I said, remember, a lot of what he's saying is theological arguments. So let's just read this chapter right here. We're just going to read the first half of this chapter. And let's get the whole understanding of it, and let's see if we're confused. All right, so verse 13, he says, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now, okay, so watch this, the beast, and we see in other scriptures that the beast is identified as leaders of kingdoms. Okay, so he said he had 10 horns and 7 heads. On his horns were 10 diadems. On his heads were blasphemous names. The beast I saw was like a leopard. His feet was like a bear's, and his mouth was like a lion's mouth. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. One of his heads appeared to be fatally wounded, but his fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. They worshiped the dragon because he gave authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against him? So get the picture, right? So again, has this happened? As we look at the details of the prophecy that's given here, has this happened? Verse 5, because this is where now he picks up. A mouth was given to him to speak boast and blasphemy. He was also given authority to act for 42 months. So now let's go back to 1572. Those who interpret, all right, this historical event, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. If they use Revelation 13, did this happen? Who was the beast? Right? Look at the details. And I'm into the details when it comes to prophecy because they are important for the very reason that you cannot use an event that happened in 1572. That's why. So he said he was given authority to act for 42 months, roughly 3.5 years. Now, 3.5 years comes up frequently in the Great Tribulation period, the 7-year tribulation period, the 70th week of Daniel. And then he says, verse 6, he began to speak blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling and those who dwell in heaven. Did this happen in 1572? Right? He says he was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. He was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nations. All those who live on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name was not written in the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slaughtered. So again, did this happen in 1572? Now I'm saying that because he's using the analogy that someone could interpret that this was an event that was fulfilled based upon this scripture. And I would say not if you read the scripture. And this is the very scripture now, verse 5 through 10, that he's reading to say that in 1572, would someone have a reasonable understanding to interpret that horrendous event that happened? Not by this scripture is what I'm saying. Then he said, if anyone has ears, he should listen. If anyone is destined for captivity, into captivity he goes. If anyone is killed with the sword he would be killed. This demands the perseverance and faith, perseverance and faith of the saints. So just because someone interprets it, and that's why I say these are theological arguments, these are clerical arguments, but not biblical arguments. So there's no basis to say that this would be a reasonable interpretation.
The idealist position reads the book of Revelation as something of a gigantic sky parable. No one single literal fulfillment, but rather multiple fulfillments, all of them illustrated by the conflict described throughout the book. This is also sometimes called the spiritual interpretation. In Revelation 11,
Now, when he says spiritual, I want to say all millennialists may believe some of this too. That a lot of Jesus came back in the spiritual realm. Okay, be careful of that.
the two witnesses are raised to life again, and this strikes consternation among those who witness it. The idealist position would take this as a testimony to the fact that down through church history, the world appears to have utterly defeated the church, but when God vindicates his people, the enemies of God are completely thrown by it.
Let me go back, because again, this is, I'm going to say absurd, but let's go to Revelation chapter 11 and see that if you read this, if you read Revelation chapter 11, that then you would conclude that. I'm going to say this from a theological standpoint, this is where the problem is. People are inserting meanings onto the text, not the text itself. So let's read it. Let's actually read it. Chapter 11, and I'm just going to read a few verses that covers them. Now watch this. So if you start off reading the text, and this is important that we read all the text. Verse 1 says, "Then I was given a measuring reed, like a rod, with these words, go and measure God's sanctuary and the altar, and count those who worship there, but exclude the courtyard outside the sanctuary. Don't measure it, because it is given to the nations. And they will trample the holy city for 42 months. Now, remember we saw that funny 42 months in chapter 13. Now, notice this. I will empower my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, dressed in sackcloth." Now, the 42 months, 1,260 days, around what? 3.5 years, or what we would say the latter half of the Great Tribulation, the 7-year tribulation period. Verse 4, "These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone wants to harm them, fire comes down from their mouth and consumes their enemy. If anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this way." So just so we're clear, now watch this. Verse 6. "These men have power to close up the sky so that it does not rain during their days and their prophecy. And they also have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every plague whenever they want." So if you want to make this spiritual, if you want to make this symbolic, how would you do that? In other words, other than saying that this is a what? A prophecy. Watch this, that it yet has to be fulfilled. So here are two witnesses that will arise during this period of time, and they will prophesy for 42 months during the beast's reign. We read about him in chapter 13. He says, "When they finish their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them, conquer them, and kill them. Their dead bodies will lie in the public square of the great city, which prophetically is called Sodom and Egypt, where also the Lord was crucified. And representatives from the people, tribe, language, and nations will view their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not permit their bodies to be put into tombs. And those who live on the earth will gloat over them and celebrate and send gifts to one another, because these two prophets brought judgment to those who live on the earth." So how did the church do this, right? Now remember, he said that this down through church history, the world appears to have utterly defeated the church. this, again, interpretation is not even true about that. I'm just showing you how that when we read the scriptures, okay, when we read the scriptures, we can understand what this scripture is saying here. Verse 11 says, "But after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet. So great fear fell on those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying up to them, 'Come up here.' And they went up to heaven in a cloud, while their bodies, I'm not talking about while their enemies watched them." Now, I just want to stop. Notice, so with these two prophets right here, and they are spoken of in Zechariah, I believe it is. They're spoken of in the prophecy of Zechariah. But again, just reading these. So if we say now, you have to insert, you have to force the thought of symbolism and all that kind of stuff onto the text here. Now, let me also say this, that throughout time, I'm going to come out of this for just a second. Throughout time, that you are able to chart prophecy. You're able to chart prophecy. And a good example of that is found in Daniel chapter 9. The chapter starts off by Daniel reading the prophecies of Jeremiah. And the prophecy that he read was that Jeremiah prophesied that the exile, the deportation, the judgment against Israel that led to their deportation to Babylon would last for 70 years. And so Daniel is reading this and saying, 70 years is almost up. Here's my point. He's able to locate by prophecy, not symbolism. He didn't interject that. He read what the prophecy said. And the same goes here, that as we say now, can we locate ourselves by the prophecy? Just as Daniel did with Jeremiah's 70-year prophecy, we can look at this prophecy and say, hey, here is the image. So for example, when you look at the image, you see that Daniel was a young man doing the head of gold, the Babylonian. Now, when Daniel was also now, as he had passed through, as we get to chapters 7 and 8, we see that we're at the end of the Babylonian Empire. And then as we get into chapter 9, we're in the kingdom of the Medes and Persians. Now, in chapter 11, we see this detailed prophecy on the Greece and Rome kingdoms. So let's step back for a moment and look at it from here's the prophecy. And now we can also see through the prophecy, see how the prophecy has come to pass. Not by us interjecting symbolism, our own interpretation. That when we read, especially in Daniel's chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, we can look back on history and see where each of these kingdoms had come and gone prophetically. So if I was to say where we locate ourselves prophetically, we would say we're yet waiting on the feet of iron and clay. We know that they haven't happened. That kingdom has not arisen yet. Why? Well, because in that kingdom, that's where the kingdom of the beast, where we read in Revelation chapter 13. That man hasn't arisen yet. And when we read of all the details, which Daniel talked about over a series of years, so chapter 7 was one prophecy. You skip, I think, almost 2 years. In Daniel 8 is another set of prophecies. And when you go to chapter 9, you skip a few more years of another set of prophecies. But in all of those prophecies, it involved this very last kingdom. right? And in this very last kingdom, which is the kingdom of the feet of iron and clay, this is at that time is when Jesus strikes the image at his feet and destroys the image, destroys the kingdom. Daniel chapter 2 also tells us that it's in the days of this kingdom where Jesus sets up an earthly kingdom that will never be in. So that's why I say prophetically, we are able to chart ourselves. So let's go back. So the problem with people reading prophecy is just that. They're not reading it. But they want to insert their own thoughts, their own opinions, their own views, their own interpretations instead of the plain reading.
Completely thrown by it. The last position, and the one advocated here by me, is called the preterist position. This word comes from a Latin prefix meaning past. This is the view that the things prophesied in Revelation were in John's immediate future and which were therefore fulfilled in our distant past, back in the first century. An example of a preterist reading would be interpreting the seven heads of the beast, Revelation 17:10, as seven Roman emperors, starting with Julius and the one currently reigning as the sixth being Nero.
Let me go back because
Roman emperors, starting with Julius and the one currently reigning as the sixth being Nero.
Okay, so let's unpack this now. How does he conclude? How does he arrive at this being the Roman, right? So let's take a look at this. Revelation chapter 17. Now, part of the problem, of course, is, as I said, him dissecting scripture from other scripture. So, but even if we just go with these scriptures here, is in a sense, this is enough to debunk what he's saying. So, Revelation chapter 17, verse 1 says, Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me. Come, I will show you the judgment of the notorious prostitute who sits on many waters. The kings of the earth committed sexual immorality with her, and those who live on the earth became drunk in the wine of her sexual immorality. So he carried me away in the spirit to a desert, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names, that had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, we've already been familiar with this, remember in chapter 13. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She had a cup in her hand filled with every vow and with the impurities of her prostitution. I'm going to skip down. And look at verse 6. It says, Then when I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and on the blood of the witness of Jesus, when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, Why are you astonished? I will tell you the secret meaning of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carry her. So again, watch this. We're told we don't have to conclude. We don't have to insert our own meanings here. He said, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explain this. Now, the reason why I say that now, let's see that if John, the angel's explanation of what John saw, is going to line up with his inserting the Roman Empire into this. Okay, so let's just see. Because all right, let's just see if and then notice he also says Nero. Now we also, which he's not going to get into, have to do a little kind of jumping ahead in the sense of kind of giving us a little clue. He believes also when we talk about the book of Revelations, he believes in what's called the early dating. So again, this is a theological argument in terms of when did John the Apostle write Revelations. Now, if he wrote Revelations before AD 70, which he believes, okay, then that's why they would put all of these interpretations in there. On the other hand, other scholars believe that John wrote Revelations in AD 95, between AD 95 and AD 105, okay? So the much later dates certainly would not hold to his view. But these are theological debates and not biblical debates. Doesn't matter because, again, we could look at if he is talking about Rome and then Nero. And I believe that the Emperor Nero was died before AD 70, I believe. Okay? So let's take a look. So the angel says, I will tell you the secret of the meaning of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carry her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up from the abyss and go to destruction. Those who live on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast that was and is not and will be present again. So tell me, when was the world astonished at, as he called it, Nero? Then he said, here is the mind of wisdom, the 7 heads of 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Now, a lot of people think this is talking about Rome or Italy, right? Rome, 7 mountains. But watch this. He tells us, so we don't have to guess on this. We don't have to wonder. We don't have to, again, insert our own meanings. He said, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings. So the 7 heads and the 7 mountains are 7 kings. He says 5 have fallen. 1 is. The other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain for a little while. So these 7 mountains are 5 kings. Now watch this, not representing a land. That's my point. Or a land of a kingdom. Verse 11, the beast that was and is not is himself an 8th king, yet he belongs to the 7th and is going to destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they will receive authority as kings with the beast for an hour. So let's stop for a moment and see. He doesn't explain this, so we have to ask the question. During the time of Nero, who are the 10 kings that receive authority with Nero, as he said it, for an hour? Notice he said they have not yet received. So at the time of the writing of Revelation, even if we put it on the early date, when did these kings arise after the book of Revelation was written? He said these, and then he says, these have one purpose, and they give their authority, power and authority to the beast. These will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will conquer them because he is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. So watch this. These will make war with who? The Lamb. Now get this. So these 10 kings, right, are going to give their authority to the beast, and then they will make war with the Lamb. So when did this happen? In 70, before 70 AD, or in 70 AD? Okay. He said, these will make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb will conquer them because he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And those with him are called chosen and faithful. He also said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute was seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and language. The 10 horns you saw, and the beast will hate the prostitute, and they will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh. And burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to carry out his plan by having one purpose, and they give their kingdom to the beast until God's words are accomplished. Now, then he said, and the woman you saw, the great city that hath an empire over the king of the earth. And that, by the way, that's called Babylon. And if you go into chapter 18, it also goes in talking about the destruction of this great city. All right. So now, all of this here, yes, full of symbolism, without a doubt, but is not the symbolism explained. So then we got wooden interpretations, we have truth, in other words, that is told in symbolism but explained. But the end of it is what? The symbolism is the truth, that there's going to be a beast and 10 kings that will fight against whatever the city is, whoever the city at the time. So when he says here, the 7 Roman emperors, starting when? What 7 Roman emperors starting when? He says starting with Julius. I don't know where they got that from. Again, where is that? And then he says reigning as the 6th being Nero. He had to, okay. So again, they're just kind of making this up. And the problem here is you almost could do that with any kind of current event, right? You can have your phone, right? You can have your phone and you look at the news and go, oh, guess what? Ooh, look at this. You know, this must be prophecy. And by the way, people do that all the time. Any kind of the recent assassination attempt of the former president, people try to make that a prophecy, believe it or not. So you could do that anytime in any way you want. All right.
Now, since preterism is the view we are teaching here, how would that position work with the example given earlier, that of the Lord's comments about the sun, moon, and stars? We agree with our futurist friend that the sun, moon, and stars are all still up there, and we differ with him about whether or not they are all going to collapse at some point in the future. So how could that work? If we say that Scripture uses particular images, we want to make sure that we draw the meaning of such images from the Scriptures themselves.
Again, let me just, as the young people say, clap back at him. We do not have to draw a meaning. God gives us the meaning, as we have proven over and over again. He has to do this in order to fit the preterist narrative that doesn't exist in Scripture.
Not from whatever that image might remind us of. It should not be an exercise in free association, where you read the prophecies of Scripture and ask if this reminds you of anything you have seen on the news recently.
But that's exactly what he just did when he said that Revelation 17 is the Roman Empire, the 7 emperors in Romans of the Roman Empire. That's exactly what he did. He certainly did not show it by Scripture. He didn't say that here's how the Scriptures say that. Now, here's a very interesting thing, by the way. Notice what he said. Let me okay, I'm going to come back to this. Let me go back. Ooh. Let me go back here. I'm gonna show you something right now.
Revelation 17:10, as 7 Roman emperors, starting with Julius and the one currently reigning as the 6th, being Nero.
Okay, so I want you to see. I want you to see that image right here. Now I'm going to come out, and I'm going to go back to my image. Here is the difference. Here is the difference in what he just said to this image here. His image is made up. In this image, it is exhaustively explained in chapters 7, 8, 9, 11, exhaustively. We are told, for example, that and this is how we would be able to say that he is talking about the kingdom of the belly and thighs, right? Where he exhaustively talks about this in chapter 11, chapter 8, where he says that this king, and he also calls it the Grecian kingdom. So we don't have to even guess about that. You know what? Let me do this. Okay, I want you to see this right here. Um, uh, let me go back and go to the scriptures themselves. Let me do that. I'm going to show you this. Now I want you to see the difference right here, because I want you to notice something. That here, okay, that his example of a preterist view that he attaches a meaning on. Now let me show you how we don't have to attach meanings onto that. So let's go to Daniel. Daniel. Where do I want to start? Let's start with chapter 7 here. Okay. Daniel chapter 7. I'm going to pick it up at verse 2. Daniel, in my vision at the night I was watching, and suddenly the four winds of heaven stirred up a great sea. 4 huge beasts came up from the sea, each different from each other. Now later we're going to see the kingdoms. The first was like a lion, but had eagle's wings. I continued watching until its wings were torn off. It was lifted up from the ground, set on its feet like a man, and given a human mind. Suddenly another beast appeared, a second one that looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, "Get up, gorge yourself on the flesh." While I was watching, another beast appeared. It was like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. It had 4 heads and was given authority to rule. And when I was watching the night vision, a 4th beast appeared, frightening and dreadful and incredibly strong, with large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled with its feet whatever was left. It was different from all the other beasts from it. It had 10 horns. Now we saw these 10 horns already. Now watch this now. I want you to see something here. If all we had was just this, then I could probably say, maybe I can understand where different people can attach whatever their meanings were onto this, right? Whatever their meanings are, right? You just throw my meanings on. But guess what? We don't have to guess that, do that. Now, not only that, but as we will see, that what the image gives is going to match the interpretation. Now, we're not left for the interpretation, but just think about this. And this is what I want you to see. Verse 6, while I was watching, another beast appeared. It was like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And it had 4 heads and was given authority to rule. Now we're going to talk. I'm bringing this up to bring out the Grecian kingdom, right? So my point is in their method that if I just wanted to say, oh, guess what? Throughout history, where do I see 4 kingdoms, right? Alexander the Great, right? But watch this. Let's go down. See if I can see that. Here's the interpretation of this image, this, as they say, highly symbolic image. But guess what? I don't have to. I want to just focus on one, just to show you. Um. Uh. Let's see what we can say there. He focused on the 10th base here. Let me see here. I think I had the wrong one. Well, okay. Okay, so these first seven. All right, all right. Now, by the way, this is Revelation chapter 13. I'm not going to get into. Uh, Let me see if I can see the other two. The one I wanted to kind of give you about where he keeps focusing on. He keeps focusing on that fourth, the beast. Um. Oh, here's what. Okay, this is the one I want. Okay, this is the one I want. So, it this is in chapter 8. And again, I want you to see how in chapter 8 he's given a vision again. This is a different vision in chapter 7. But now I want you to notice this in chapter verse 15 says, "While I Daniel was watching in the vision, trying to understand it, there stood before me someone who appeared to be a man. I heard a human voice calling from the middle of the Ulai, you Ulai. Gabriel explained the vision to the man." Now watch this again. Explain the vision, so we don't have to put our own interpretation to it. So he approached where I was standing, and when I came near, I was terrified and fell down for the man. He said to me, "Understand the vision refers to the time of the end." Right? And again, so when will this vision happen? The time of the end. While I was speaking to me, fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. He touched me and made me stand up, and he said, "I will tell you what will happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath," but because it refers to an appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goats represent the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes represents the first king. The four horns that took the place of the shadow horn represents four kingdoms that will arise from that nation without his power. Now I want you to see that. Here you see Alexander the Great. Now also in great detail you see this in chapter 11. But Alexander the Great right here, that is prophesied, okay, that Alexander the Great. Now, the reason why I say that is because remember even if before we got to uh, this interpretation, which by the way, we get the interpretation, um, we also see, watch this, let's see. Look at verse 2. I saw the vision. Now watch this. So if all we had is these visions, this is an example I want you to see now. So verse 8 says, "In the third year of King Belshazzar reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the first one appeared to me earlier." That would be chapter 7. "I saw the vision, and as I watched, I was in the fortress of the city of Susa, in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was beside Ulai Canal. I looked up, and there was a ram standing beside the canal. He had two horns, and the two horns were long, but one was longer than the other. And the longer horn came up last. I saw the ram charging to the rest, to the north, the south. No animal could stand against him, and there was no one to rescue from his power. He did whatever he wanted and became great. And I was observing a male goat appeared, coming from the west across the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. The goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes, and he came towards the two-horned ram, and I saw him standing beside the canal and rushing toward him with savage fury. And I saw him approaching the ram, and infuriated with him, he struck the ram, shattered his two horns, and the ram was not strong enough to stand against him. And the goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one to rescue him from his power. The male goat became very great, but when he became powerful, the large horn was shattered, and four conspicuous horns came up in its place, pointing towards the four winds in the heavens. Now, the reason why I read this, because again, this is a lot different than what Pastor Doug and his interpretation, the method of his interpretation. So even if we just had this vision here without going further, and that's what they do. But even if I was to do this, I could infer, right, and say, oh, wait a minute, look at this. I can look at this history. What does this look like from a historical perspective? And come up with, right, the Grecian kingdom, right? I mean, it's almost like a dead giveaway with the horn and then the ending of the horn and then four horns came up because that's what happened to Alexander the Great, right? His kingdom was divided between his four generals. And my point is this: how does he get then from Revelation chapter 17 that these are the seven emperors of the seven Roman emperors of the Roman Empire? So how does he get that? I want to compare the imagery that was given, where you could conclude that, but remember, we are given the interpretation. How do you get that from here? And that's where the problem, that is the weakness and the problem here with this preterist view. You are inserting thoughts into the text that's not there. Notice, even with the vision that Daniel is given, just the vision itself, there's enough that we could probably say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can insert something in there. But of course, looking from a historic standpoint, if that's all we have. Now, God in his sovereignty saw fit to give us more, like the interpretation. Okay? All right, guys, we're going to pick this up in part 3 and continue on. That's why I said, let's actually read these scriptures and not just, kind of just rely because these are popular leaders, just accept what they say. But when you actually read, you can go, how are they getting that, right? How are they coming up? How are they arriving at the logic? How does the preterist arrive at its interpretation? Not by reading the scripture. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective, because I'm told that the more you subscribe and like, it gets that algorithm going. So please subscribe and like this video. And if you have a comment or thought, by all means, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in part 3.